was definitely paused. Thank you.
Okay.
Um, Welcome everyone to our first virtual discussion of BookTini's reading selection. We are reading or discussing Big Friendship: How We Keep Each Other Close by Aminatou and Anne Friedman. This was our inspirational selection for October. And I thought it was a good subject to discuss across chapters since we're talking about friendship, and friendship is a component of the book club. So, first off, just to dive right on in, um, regarding the book, did anybody vote for this book that's on the panel right now?
This is Tawanda from Atlanta chapter.
Oh, maybe I should introduce everybody. I'm sorry. Let me go ahead and do that. This is a first for me, so please give me some grace. First off, I am Nakia. I am a part of Oakland East Bay chapter of BookTini, and I'm also the founder and current national chair. And then we have EJ. You want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm EJ Evans. I am the founder of the DMV chapter with Tawanda, who's also on the Zoom. I am formerly the head of that chapter and now the regional East Coast regional chapter leader, as well as the head of the book board. I'm considered a literary chair. Sorry, I did not prep this intro. I didn't know we were gonna have one.
It's okay.
I'm a little quicker with what I'm saying.
Thank you, EJ.
Yeah.
Tawanda.
Okay, so I'm Tawanda. I am the lead in the Atlanta chapter. I came from the DMV chapter as well as the Twin City chapter. And yeah.
Thank you, Tawanda. Erika.
Hi, I'm Erika. I am the charter member of the Silicon Valley chapter, formerly known as Fremont, and I am the current community service chair.
Thank you. Free.
Hello, I am Free. I'm the social chair of the Oakland East Bay chapter.
And a book board member.
Oh, that's it. Yeah.
And then we have Tiffany Black.
Hello, everybody. I'm Tiffany Black. I'm one of the founding members of the Uptown Oakland chapter, and I'm the community service chair for the chapter as well.
Okay, welcome everybody. So yeah, let's dive on into our discussion for Big Friendship: How We Keep Each Other Close. I asked before, how many of you voted for this book?
That's what I was saying. I did not vote for this book.
So it looks like none of us voted for this book. That's wow, but it still won overwhelmingly. So that means a lot of members did want to read about, I guess, friendship. Has anybody had a book that kind of helped them develop their feelings about friendship or how they would navigate friendship, or is this your first time?
It's my first time. I don't think I've ever read a book about friendship, nor have I been I never gravitated towards book about friendship. Most of the books that I read that involve friends are just fiction books because chick lit is great. So,
Right.
I'm reading about friendship in that context, but not an analysis of a friendship.
Right.
Or even in self-help way. I've never, there's a lot of self-help books about yourself or about romantic relationships, but I've
Right.
never seen anything about platonic friendships.
Right.
The fact that this particular book not only dove into their friendship, but they were open and honest enough to talk about, the things that were awesome and where they really had the challenges. Because I think sometimes we as friends, sometimes we don't always know how to approach the things when things go a little rocky with our friendships. We just ride that train, so to speak. But I'm appreciative that they were transparent enough to say, okay, this is the stuff that we went through and how we handled it.
Right.
Yeah, so I didn't vote for this book because I love Ali Wong and I felt like we're in the middle of a pandemic and I wanted to laugh.
Yeah.
So that's why I didn't vote for it. But that also, for me, initially, just like the description we got when we were voting, I was like, it's kind of like, who needs a book on friendship? Like, friendship comes naturally. Like, you shouldn't need a book on it. But once I actually read it, I was like, okay, well, first off, there's the dynamic of like, it's a black and white female relationship. Yes, there are some different dynamics when it comes to that. And then even like I'm having some challenges with some of my big friendships due to the pandemic. And I was like, man, I never considered that maybe me and my friends might need to go to therapy. So like again,
Yeah.
this book ended up being the right read at the right time for me, even though I really did want Ali Wong. And that she's probably gonna end up on a
too.
ballot again because we really need to laugh. But just saying.
Look, yeah, I agree.
I was gonna say, in regards to that
So-
point about reading about friendship, I realize a lot of the times that we analyze friendship as Black women, it's usually in relation to a TV show, right? Because we know a lot of big Black female friendships like Issa and Molly
I
and
was gonna say that, yeah.
girlfriends and everything. So
Oprah and Bill.
yeah,
Yeah.
Which was
I
also mentioned in the books, right? They mentioned that too as a model of like friendship that they look to.
I mean, I was gonna say when I saw that it was nominated because Insecure, the relationship between Molly and Issa has been such a big discussion topic this year.
Mhm.
It seems like a, perfect, you know what I mean, to discuss because that watching their relationship deteriorate was the first time where I was like, wow, this kind of might be something I can identify with. You know what I mean? Versus watching Living Single as a kid or watching Girlfriends and not really looking at it as real life, but just like some entertainment
Mhm.
or whatever. And at this age, it was like, okay, this kind of might hit close to home. You know what I mean? So this book, some of the things that happened in the book also made me feel the same way. Free, what were you about to say?
Oh, I was just going to say that I didn't vote for the book, but one of the reasons I didn't vote for it was because it the summary read to me like it was going to be a self-help book, and I stray very far from self-help books. It's just not something that I can get into, no matter what the subject matter is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really felt that that's what this was going to be. So I struggled wanting to read it, and then got into it and found that it wasn't that at all. Like, there were definitely topics that could fit into self-help, but it definitely wasn't a self-help book. And so I really, really appreciated the way that they, took on the subject matter, and found out that, I wish I had this 20 years ago.
Feel the same way. I feel the same way. And I've heard that from other members, like being very hesitant to read it and then getting into it and being like, this is not what I expected. And I actually am happy I read it. One thing that really stuck out to me in beginning the book is their discussion about origin stories of friendships, and that was something that um, was like opened my eyes to that it opened my eyes to because we talk about how our relationships start, but do we really like hold up? This is how my friendship started as like a badge of honor or something to honor. You know what I
I
mean?
do.
You do? See, I
Yeah,
had never
even
really
when
thought about that. Go ahead.
even when I was forming, I think I was chief bridesmaid at EJ's wedding, and even when forming my toast, you got to go back to the origin
That's
story. And it
true.
all starts in a seventh grade English class. Tell you to partner up, and you look at the one Black girl in the class, and you're like, "That's it. That's her." Blossomed into decades long friendship.
Hmm.
So I love a good origin story.
Well, let's talk about our origin stories. Do you guys have like a really good or inspirational or just, a regular origin story for one of your closest friends that you want to share? Free?
Two, but they're short.
Okay.
One of my very closest friends, we met through a service organization when we were in high school, and the way that it kind of was set up was kind of like a sorority. Like they kind of acted like they were a sorority type of thing, and so went through some like hazing process, weird, and we were standing next to each other and shared a joke, and that was it. Like literally our friendship took off from there. It was like, oh, wow, we share the same type of humor. And so for us, I think we felt like there was an immediate sisterhood because it felt like we had our own little world inside of this other world
Mm-hmm.
that nobody else was going to get. And it's true to this day. Like we have inside jokes and, little things we can, give each other looks. And it's just like a very genuine friendship, like a thing that we share that nobody else can kind of come into.
Mm-hmm.
And then some recent friends that I've actually made, like within the last, I think 5 or 6 years, have become really, really great friends of mine. And I met them on a bachelorette weekend for
Oh.
Yeah, for one of my other really close friends. And I had never met any of her, like really, really close friends. She lived far away from all of them, and went to this weekend. It was like 20 of us. And I had never met any of them before, and literally left with 20 friends.
Oh,
And
wow.
probably one of the greatest experiences I've ever had in my life. I don't make friends necessarily that easily,
Mm-hmm.
and at least not stay close to people like that.
Right.
And I left there feeling like, oh, I can't see, my life without these people after 3 days. And we've been tight ever since.
And it's funny that you had that experience though, Free, because it very much reminds me of the portion of the book where they talked about like that
Yeah.
the annual birthday trip that started off as like a small girlfriends thing and like grew to be a thing.
Do
Like,
that now.
yeah, that was y'all. Like that's how y'all started.
Yeah. Yep.
One of my closest friends, she now lives in Houston, and it's hilarious how we met. We had a small we have a small clique of friends, and we're all from different areas of the country, and we all now live here, but she relocated to Houston. But the glue between she and I was a friend who is now someone we don't she's an associate now. She's not a friend.
Oh, she's demoted.
She was demoted, not because she's not a great person, but she is 24/7 Christian. Let me put this holy oil on you. I got to pray for you. You had soda. I got to, get that demon spirit out of you. Nerve wracking. But the funny thing is, she and I are very dear friends. And part of the book that talks about, having to make time to see each other online, FaceTiming, that's something that's actually very much of a part of our lives now. But the funny thing is that if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have met one of our members who's in the Sacramento chapter right now. She probably doesn't know it. She's on our participant list now. I met her 3 years before she became my sorority sister. So Toya, I'm talking about one of our friends, Robin, who was part of your MPHC chapter, but long story short, we are actually very close because of another friend of ours. So when we see each other, when she comes back to town, we always have to do our traditional, we got to hit Amador Valley to go wine tasting. But I can tell you this pandemic has really affected all of us because we're so used to seeing each other. Let's go to Houston. Houston comes here, whatever. Now we really have to force ourselves to get on FaceTime, which I thought was the devil at one point. Oh no! If I can't talk to you in a text message,
Right.
Much.
Right.
But I'm grateful now that we have technology. I get to see you guys, but it's really hard. At least for some of us, we're very used to being very social with our friends, going out with everybody, etc. It's really hard being confined in a space and having to rely on technology to maintain our friendships, our levels of friendships. It's been difficult for me, I can say.
Yeah.
Erika, one thing about your point on FaceTime. So I was one of those people before the pandemic that don't FaceTime me.
I'll watch this.
Or it's like, you need to text me first to make sure that I am presentable before you just FaceTime me. But now like FaceTime is a huge connector for me because I can't see my mom. And so the one time I was able to go home during this pandemic, I got my mom an iPhone, and now that's literally the way I'm able to see her. So and like, I don't want her, she doesn't want me. So I could be laying in bed, whatever, mom is calling on FaceTime, right? But it's very interesting. Like, you should try to warn text me first before you just FaceTime button.
Right. I was thinking about, I have an origin story of one of my closest friends now, which is so funny because I am a very shy person, and a lot of people take that as being standoffish, right? I am shy. You can shake your head if you want to, Erika. I'm very shy with strangers, people I don't know, or people I'm not really close with. And so there was someone who we went to high school together. We had a mutual friend. And then when I was about in my late 20s, we ended up working in the buildings right next to each other. So we would run into each other all the time in the morning, getting like coffee, stuff like that. And she would always be like, we need to hang out. And I'd be like, yeah, girl. And then keep it moving because I'm like, I don't know. It just makes me nervous when people like want to do one-on-ones with me when we haven't like built up like a continuous type of interaction or whatever. And the crazy thing about it is this was around the time when Twitter became kind of big and we both were on Twitter, and that's how we actually started a real friendship. And then it led to, oh, let's go here one day because we both were interested in going to like an event or something like that. And from there, we're like super close, like talk every day through text and see each other. Well, we don't see each other because of the pandemic, but would be if it weren't for the pandemic. And this book made me think about that, how I was avoiding her a lot because I'm like, if we go to lunch, I'm gonna have to talk about what, you know? For somebody like me that's an introvert and shy, it's like you're putting a spotlight on me, you know what I mean? But because we were able to connect through Twitter, it was, it was smooth after that. So yeah, that was funny to me.
One of my origin friendship stories is kind of funny in that I was roommates, like, or in the same suite as her sister the year before, and her sister would like never talk to me. So her sister was like, Tiffany's a lot. I can be a lot. She'd be like, Tiffany has such a big personality. She's from New Jersey. They're from North Carolina. So we never really connected. So it wasn't until her younger sister moved in that I became best friends with her younger sister. And then she was just like, oh, that's just Tiffany's way. She's actually really sweet and generous and all these things. But it's funny that like me and her younger sister are besties. But the year before, her older sister would like never talk to me. I'd be like, hey, Jamie. And she'd be like, hi, and keep going.
Hi, don't talk to me.
Because she was like, Tiffany's just so loud and so much energy. And so like, I'm not used to that. So yeah. But like now the sister that wasn't talking to me is also extremely close with me now too. So
one thing that came up for me in before even reading the book was the fact that this is a group of friends who work together because they do the podcast together. And it made me think about how, when you're working on something with a friend, how that can change the dynamic because there's different expectations. Have you guys ever had an issue or a smooth situation where you worked with a friend on something big that could be work or some other kind of project that kind of made you either be like, I don't know about her anymore, or it made you be like, I'm so happy this is my friend because it worked. Why is EJ cracking up? And then if you don't want to share because it could be too personal, you might want to discuss, change some names if you want to.
No, I just laughed at the anecdote, or the little explanatory like statement because I thought that was so funny. I am actually very protective of friendships. I do not make them easily because I was one of those kids that was kind of like an outcast when I was growing up. And so at first there was a lot of people pleasing. And then after I realized like that it required so much energy, it became like I have people I bang with. And if anyone else, I just don't want to let into my circle. So a lot of growing up was learning to like have the different levels of friendship that they were talking about and all of that. But as regarding your question, so Tawanda and I actually used to have a podcast.
Oh.
And
I used to love it too.
it was big fun until Tawanda moved out of the area. So when we lived 25 minutes away from each other, meeting every Saturday to kiki, eat sushi, and record a podcast was great, right? And it was a commitment we could make. But Tawanda got an internship or a fellowship and had to move to Minnesota of all places. I don't like to coat. So it was an interesting transition for us. And one of the things that suffered was our podcast. But I loved in reading the story about how they moved across the country constantly and it changed how their relationships worked, and that they were able to adapt to these changes in location. And I was used to, and Tawanda kind of led on to this, but we've been friends since the 7th grade, right? We're on our 24th year of friendship at this point. And she's been down the street from me the majority of the time, less going to college, and I was at home all the time anyway. So this was really difficult for me to wrap my mind around, that my support system was moving all the way to Minnesota, which I didn't even know it was on a map at the time. I had to look it up. Because why would I want to go there? So
Prince was there.
That's the great. the only reason why I was like, all right, maybe you can make it, you know, and it might be all right out there a little bit. But our friendship survived that, which I think was more challenging on Tawanda than it was on me, just because it was like a much different experience for her for where her life went. But our friendship survived and the podcast did not. And I'm so much happier that that's the way that it went, right? Because it was something where we were starting to gain traction and people were noticing us and people were reaching out for potential, like, you know, expansion of this idea. We had a person who followed our podcast in South Africa. We were like, look at us, we're doing big things. And it just, when push came to shove, I'm glad that we still are friends, even if our podcast didn't succeed in that manner.
Right.
It can be hard, but especially since we had to play to our respective strengths. There were some things I was good at and Tawanda was not as good at, and vice versa. And so creating the idea is big fun. Pushing it forward sometimes could be a headache, trying to schedule, figure everything out. Having that open communication with your friend partner, I think kind of how they kind of categorize this relationship. But also knowing that your friendship is bigger than this endeavor. And I think they had to figure that out through the book, right? Like they have this podcast and their friendship suffered. And I think I prefer the reverse, where the friendship keeps going, but the podcast suffers, right?
Right. That's a good way to look at it. I like that. Free.
So I was gonna say, like, I've had situations where I've went into like business situations with friends of mine, and two in particular, one the friendship survived and one the friendship did not. And the one where it survived, I'm very grateful that it did. And I feel like obviously unknowingly there were certain things that were addressed in this book that I was able to kind of dig and find to, you know, save that friendship. But in thinking about the friendship that didn't survive because of a business relationship, I realized that it wasn't one I necessarily needed nor wanted to survive that particular situation. And it was one where the other person wasn't willing, right, to do the work to make the friendship work. You know, even though we were having this, you know, big issue as far as business goes. And to this day, I'm okay with that. Like that one was just not meant to work out. But I've also had friendships where we've literally, you know, worked together in a space or an office and have had really awkward or strange dynamics. But I've had to fire friends in the work. And it literally like brought you in one day and was like, look, this is what it's gonna have to be. And those survived much more easily than the other situation. And I mean, those were, you know, much more mature situations. It was like, I get it, this is a professional environment. If I wasn't what I was supposed to be doing, I wasn't on my stuff, you're in that position where you had to decide whether or not you wanted to deal with that.
Yeah, that's rough.
Know, I didn't. So, you know, I love you. I'll see you on Saturday for brunch, but you got to pack up your desk and go.
And for brunch.
And I mean, I think it's all about, you know, where you're at in life and the skills that you possess at that point in time. Because had that happened 15 years ago, no, that friendship would not have survived, right? None of the friendships would have survived any turmoil in them. And I know that because I know where I was and who I was at that time. So thank God I went
briefly reminds me. I'm sorry.
So Free, because you're a fellow business owner as well, have you ever had relationships that started off as business relationships that eventually turned into friendship?
Absolutely. I mean, I've got some recent friendships that developed because of business. And I think, you know, these are people that I will take with me forever. You know, I wouldn't want to lose those friendships. And I think that business relationship grew us and our friendship in a particular way that, you know, I haven't had some other friendships grow. And, you know, for reasons based in business, but I think you learn a lot about people and their character, you know, when you go through certain things with them. And so coming out of it, I'm like, me and you can rock. I appreciate you on a complete
Right.
level, you know, that's not just about kikiing and giggling and having a good time together. You know, I can trust you, and that's something different.
Mm, that's a good point. Tawana, did you have something?
Well, your story reminded me of something T.I. said, and I don't go to him for advice often, despite living in Atlanta now. But it was regarding working with friends, and he was telling his wife that the onus of maintaining the health of that relationship relies on the friend who is, I guess, the employee, because you can either be my friend and work with me and we both get money, or you could just be my friend for free. So I always thought that was just interesting advice, because it's like, I'm not going to sacrifice the friendship. So the choice is yours. We can work harmoniously together, or
Right.
we can just not work and, continue
Yeah.
to be friends for free.
Right.
Right.
So I find it interesting when people's try to approach you with a business relationship as their friend. So sometimes you see, like, some of the multi-level marketing things where people are coming at you, and you know what I'm saying? Like, where
Yeah.
those are, I want us to stay friends. I don't believe in what you're doing. I want to support
Right.
you. I don't believe in what you're doing. Like, that makes it all so uncomfortable. So I
It,
try not to mix money and stuff like that. If it's
yeah.
something where we're coming together to work on like a legitimate project, or even if you need to like borrow money, those, to me, I have to cut some completely apart from our friendship, right? Like, that has to be something where you have to be okay respecting my boundary and what I would want to invest in or invest in you. But at the same time, if someone is my friend and I'm asking for a service for them, or they have a product I want to purchase, I'm not going to be the person to say, well, we homies, so you're going to give me a discount. Like, I think there is a balance there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have, like, friends, family who will come and say, oh, well, I'm selling coffee, or I am a vacation planner. And I'm like, I love you. Please stop. And so it becomes uncomfortable.
It
Yeah.
does. Yeah. Hmm. I'm going to dive right into one thing that they've really focused on well, in my opinion, with this book, was about the fact that they were, one friend was white and one friend was black, and how, that creates a different type of interaction when racial issues come up. I thought it was handled well. I could tell that Anne Friedman is an ally that seems like she could be trusted, to handle Aminatou's situations with care, and basically say, whatever it is for you, I support it. You know what I mean? And so I thought that was good. But it made me think about, do I have any big friendships with people who are not black, with other white women or women of color? And I realized I don't really have any. So I've never had these issues of race come up. But I did have a friend, I talked about this in my chapter meeting. I had a friend at work who was white, and she sat close to me, so we would talk all the time. And she was really, really cool. But I did the thing that I did to the friend that I told you guys about in my origin story, where when she left the job, she was like, "This is my email, hit me up so we can talk." She moved out of state. And I was like, "Yeah, girl." And I never hit her up,
Oh, no.
right? And this was like a year ago. And so reading the book, I was like, maybe I need to reach out to her just to see, like, how are you doing in the pandemic, and see where it goes from there. But all that to say, do any of you have big friendships with women who are not black, other people of color who, you feel like is an ally, or who might not be after all of these racial issues have come up? Um, if you have other friends of color or not of color have any issues come up recently because of like the George Floyd situations and Breonna Taylor?
I think
Yeah.
that's a really, really good question, because I know me, 99% of my friends are Black. I have one Indian friend who is an ally, but she's learned to be an ally.
Hmm.
I've had to let go of friendships of Black folks who were friends, because they seem to be more on the side of Donald Trump. And,
Oh
this is
no.
Oh, no, because we know they're out there. We know there are Black
Yeah,
women out there
that's
who,
true.
you know, for whatever reason, align themselves or see themselves as one of those folks than they do within their own community. I don't know if it's shame or whatever, but it is what it is. I don't have much time for them either. But I've had two Black women friends who I've had to kind of love from afar, and both of them I met at my former church. And they're my former church because they have leaders that supported Donald Trump, supported him when he was running for office. And when he got into office, this is who God chose.
Cool.
No,
The devil is a lie.
exactly. Not at all. And this
Like-
is a church that has taught us, if you read your scripture, you should be able to recognize the devil. So the fact that you can't recognize the devil in front of you means I can't be here.
Right.
So these
No
are the kind of
discernment,
folks that
no
were part
wisdom.
of my circle. And reading this book, I actually felt a certain level of sadness. But I also know that with certain friendships, and it was very evident in this book, there are people that are going to go, my favorite term, sorry if it sounds bad, balls to the wall for you. And it seems like Anne was that person.
Yeah.
I can't say that these two individuals, former friends from my church, we're supposed to be aligned in faith, not as just as Black women, but we're supposed to be sisters in Christ. And you can't recognize that that there are people that you support that would like to see us harmed or dead.
Mm.
So from the strength of that, I don't think you would have my back. You might say you do, but you don't. And it made me sad. My my friend, and I'm happy to share her name with everybody. I have a very good friend who's down in the South Bay who is Indian. She's dating a Black man. She has her best friend is Black, real Black, and they have a law practice together. And she'll go hard for you. She does. She's like, I recognize this nonsense in the world. They're doing it to me. I'm Indian. And I know that there are specific nuances between me being Indian and having relationships with African Americans. I'm not going to say we're all going through the same thing because we're not. And I appreciate that she recognizes that.
Right.
Anne seems to be able, it took her some time.
Right.
I think there was a chapter in the book where Anne had like a party and there was a lot of, it was all white folks. And Amina was, feeling a little, feeling kind of way about that.
Right.
Even though it wasn't Anne's party per se, but I think Anne was, at first she was like, well, hold up, that's not even the intent. I didn't invite no KKK folks. This is not what that was. But she took a step back and she thought about it. And so that piece I appreciated.
I had a little bit of an issue with that part of the book. But my issue was more with Amina, and I had reached out to Tawanda about this because I kept wondering why Amina centered herself so much in that party, where when she walked in, she then thought it was a reflection of her that her friend didn't have Black people there. And I don't tend to put myself like an examination of self on how other people act, right? You are responsible for your actions. I'm responsible for my feelings in regard to those actions. And so I was a little taken aback by how upset she got. I could understand a conversation happening, but she really was like, you're a representation, like you use me as a representation of who you are. And so if you only have white friends, then you are inaccurately portraying who you are to the outside world because of who I am. And I thought that that was a little bit of a stretch. I did. But I also thought it was a good way for her to explain how she felt. I didn't get a sense in reading this book that race was as important of a factor to her or how she identified herself as it was until I read that particular chapter of the book. It was like an anecdote, but it wasn't central, right? Like it wasn't like reading about a Black woman who, only had Black acquaintances throughout her friendships. And then here's this one white person and how things have evolved. So that's, I think, why I was a little shocked. I am so used to being the only Black person in a room on many occasions that I don't think I'd take it if my friend invited me. I think I would be there. I wouldn't look at as tokenism, but I have seen instances where that is exactly what you are. It's tokenism.
Right.
Like it's an evaluation of your friendship.
I kind of thought that I thought she overreacted as well, but I also had to think about when because they were in different cities now, they had moved away from each other and they had their friendship was a little bit was getting a little bit shaky because they weren't, they didn't have that in-person connection like they used to. And so I looked at it as Aminatou is seeing and change. And she's thinking she's changing because before she would never have a party with only one Black person there. And now all of a sudden she does, but she wasn't thinking this is not really Anne's party. She's just hosting it, but it's not her party. So if Anne is throwing a party, she will likely have other people of color there. But it just goes to show how different our perspectives are. Aminatou was just like, I feel like I might be losing my friend and she's changing in some kind of way. And that was the only thing she could see other than saying she's not really trying to change. It's just that she has a friend who doesn't have any Black friends, So it was a little bit eye opening to see how two people can, be in the same situation and see it so completely differently.
Right. And I just to answer that first question you had about having a big friendship with a person who's a person of color, not a person of color, or a person of color but not Black. So one of my good friends from college is white. And we've been relative, and like I said, I have kind of spheres for my friendships. So my big friendships, there's only like two people who really fall in there, and then everybody else kind of falls into the outliers, right? But she would be someone I considered a close friend. And when I first met her and she was surrounded by people of color, and her boyfriend was a person of color, and she always hung out with all these like very cool Black people. And I thought, and she came to me and approached me and wanted to be friends. And I never felt that she was doing that in a fake way. I always felt like this is truly who she is. She really likes people of different backgrounds and views, and she is open to experiences with all of them. And as she grew, ironically, her friends group changed as she got older and skewed more towards having more people in her life that were white. And it kind of took me by shock, only because in that everybody evolves, right? I wasn't expecting this evolution from her. I was like taken aback a little bit. It wasn't that she wasn't being true to who she was or anything like that. And it certainly wasn't a reflection of our friendship, because we're still friends to this day. And she still invites me to all the same hangouts that she has had. And we've been, our kids are interact with each other, things like that. But it was just kind of a shock for me to adjust to who she was becoming.
Yeah.
Because she was no longer like my down white friend. You know what I'm saying? And it's kind of weird that that's when I started, I was like, wow, this is an evolution I wasn't expecting.
Yeah.
Was it because she got married and to like a white man, and then family building and all that other stuff, and then how that is, your relationship with your man, you start bringing in new friends, that kind of thing. Was it
or where she lived?
Yeah.
Actually happened before that. I think it was when she started to understand what her passion for work was. And the area she decided to go into was more environmentally focused. And that's not an area I think that has a lot, even though it is crucial to low income communities, environmental justice is very high and very important things. I think people who are leading the way in environmental justice aren't Black. Aren't usually people of color. And that's usually for access, right? Because she decided to get a master's in a different country that had more of a focus in environmental justice and could afford to do so. Whereas her Black counterpart, same upbringing, may not have the same resources, right? So she's introduced to people who are of a different privilege. But because of that focus, I think her friends group just evolved. She's still friends with the people she was friends with before her friends group evolved. And so to me, it's not a reflection of who she's dating or anything like that. It was just an evolution of who her career, her desires in
her
life,
environment.
right. And so it ended up that way. So I don't So the thing is, I don't feel any kind of way. I don't feel like, oh, she used to be down and she's not, and it's because of X, Y, and Z thing that are negatives. I actually think all those things are incredibly positive, because now she knows who she is. She knows what she likes. She knows what she doesn't like. She knows who she wants in her life. And I'm still a part of her life. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's kind of a part.
Mm-hmm.
So growing up, for me, having friends that weren't Black, who were like, Hispanic, Latino, whatever, that wasn't considered like an interracial friendship.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like we
Yeah.
were very much of the same ilk, going through the same experience, things like that. So I'm a part of a group, we call ourselves Las Chicas. We are Black, white, Colombian, Puerto Rican, Trinidadian, Dominican, and Cuban. And it's an interesting thing in time. Like when, particularly back to your question about like George Floyd, I actually got really upset with my circle, because I was like, you guys didn't even check on me to see if I was okay or how I was doing. And they said, well, it didn't happen to you. I was like, wait, what? And then it exposed that one of the things is that we, because we have been friends for so long, had almost discounted or ignored those things about each other.
Right.
And so while as the one Black girl in the group, I felt like they should check on me, one of my other girlfriends who was right. And so it's like we put like you get to this place in the relationship where you really do like don't think about the race that your friend comes from, because you just see them as a person. But then like when these bigger things happen that impact them because of the race they are, like we should be responsible and step in. Like I said to him, where we messed up is that other people like, oh, I don't see color. Like we kind of didn't see it within our own group anymore, because we have been friends for so long, but like we need to do a better job of supporting each other in those ways. And so like, again, I was like, I feel terrible now that I never hit you up about that. And she's like, I also now feel bad that you felt like you needed to be supported when that George Floyd situation happened. Right. So we all have instances like that. But again, when it comes to like friends, like, yes, within that group we have a white girlfriend, but she's a white girlfriend that teaches hip-hop dance class in public schools that is majority minority, right? But she also grew up in the community with us, so she's always been around Black and Latino people her entire life. So we also don't, sometimes we other her too, and like, oh, but Nikki's not really, she's not really the white girl, like she dances hip-hop better than I do, like, that's Nikki. But it's just interesting even how some people feel like what is an interracial friendship. To me, that's not interracial, but to others they'll be like, oh yeah, because like they're Puerto Rican and you're Black, that's y'all in the same race. But growing up on, at least maybe it might be an East Coast thing, we didn't separate it in those ways.
Yeah,
there's cultural competency when you speak the same understanding, right? Like when you and your friends understand and go through the same thing, it doesn't feel so much like you need to reach out to them because you feel like it's going to come up anyway. Like I don't need to make a special phone call to talk to somebody, to talk to my best friend about George Floyd. We're going to talk about George Floyd when the call comes.
Right.
But,
that I'm glad you brought that up, Tiffany, because I just remember one of my first early friends from school in elementary school was a Mexican girl named Michelle, and I didn't have a middle name, and I was upset about it. So I told my mom I wanted one, and she was like, "Well, what do you want it to be?" And it became Michelle because that was my best friend, and I thought she had a cool, normal name. I felt like my name wasn't normal or whatever, and I totally forgot that story until you brought up having like interracial, you know, friendships with people, and not really, especially when you're young, you're not tripping off of, you're not even thinking about that. It's just like you sit next to me in class and we just talk all the time. So now you're my bestie. You know what I mean? And that's exactly how it was. And now I have this middle name from this girl that I haven't talked to since 1987, probably. But yeah.
I mean, like, I guess I grew up in the projects, and so my first best friend was the girl that lived across the fire escape from me, because we used to like, I would send over Jello that I had made over to her across the fire escape, and she would send over like, different desserts from her culture, and that was Wendy, and Wendy was Ecuadorian.
Oh, okay.
And Dominican. She also taught me some Spanish, of course, the bad curse words, right? Like,
Right.
That's the recipe for best friends when you're little.
For real.
That's it. That's all you need.
But again, it's just because we were both sitting in the window, on the
Right.
fire escape, and like I would see her all the time, and so like I had some Jello, I passed it to her, and she passed it back, and like rice puddings and things like that. Like,
Interesting how we grow, even with people that we've known for so long. The assumption is we're all on the same page, but as we grow, we start to see things from a totally different lens.
Yes.
To the point where you like, I didn't know you felt that way at all, or they'll look at me like, Erika, for real? Yeah, it's surprising. So the fact that we're talking about how people view world activities now, and they look at what's happening with, just with us, with Black folks, and then, well, why are they upset? You've been my friend for how long? You don't get this. But then again, the assumption is because we're friends, we truly have a shared experience, and that's not always the case.
Right.
Especially for, I feel like, long-term friendships, when a major catalyst happens in someone's life. Because I recall me and another friend went to pick up a friend that was coming back from the military. And this was in 2012. So we're just at the start of Obama's new presidency, or new term. Thank you. New term. And so we're talking about politics, and we're like, it's wild that Donald Trump is like calling for Obama's birth papers. Like, who does he think he is? And he sits in the back seat, and he's white, but he was always, again, our down white friend. He dated Black girls. Like, he listened to all of our music, and something happened over in the military. I couldn't tell you what, because he goes, well, sometimes I feel like Donald Trump is the only one that understands what's going on right now. And even my friend who was driving, we both slowly turned to the back seat, and we're like, are you a Republican? Like, we were horrified. We had no idea what had happened, because I guess we had just taken for granted that in our bubble, we all still felt and believed the same things, that we all were still reacting to the world based off of the same lived experience. But he had went off and had another lived experience that we just weren't part of. And it ended up shifting a lot about him, unfortunately.
Are you still friends?
No.
So I have a Trumper friend, and every time he posts something on one of the posts that I do, I get hit up all the time with like, why are you friends with this person? Mind you, we have known each other since elementary school. He was 1 year ahead of me. His sister was 1 year behind me. His mother was one of my elementary school teachers. Like, we're all friends on Facebook, including his mom. Like, my hometown isn't that big, right? And so the reason why I remain friends is because while we don't align on the views of the presidency, like, I know that as a person, there are other things that we have in common and agree on. This is just one of them. We don't. Also, I don't want to live in an echo chamber. So it is always interesting to get his perspective. And while I might not necessarily agree, it helps me to understand why people are voting for Trump. Again, like, I don't agree with their reasoning.
Not to live in an echo chamber, but I'm probably not going to have a big friendship with someone whose values and beliefs are so separate from mine.
Yeah.
And I think it goes back to where people fall in your life.
Yeah,
there are people that we know that just do not share what we have, but you are not going to share intimate parts of my life, and we just have so far apart, I guess, values and beliefs. Because I do think at the base of any friendship is a shared, I guess, outlook on the world and life. Like, me and EJ argue all day, but when it comes to our core values, they are very similar. So yeah,
mine are definitely better, but they're definitely similar.
I feel like I wanted to transition to this other question that I have about, they gave a few they gave some advice about how to handle conflict based on the conflict that they had to handle. So it made me think something that Tiffany said earlier about friendship coming naturally, and it does in certain instances. But when you approach these conflicts, a lot of times it doesn't come naturally on how to handle them,
Yeah.
right? So, was there anything in the book that made you guys think, okay, this issue that I had a few years ago or even last week, I didn't handle it right after, maybe I should have done what they did. Maybe I should have went to counseling with my friend, or maybe we should have had a hard conversation and really communicated our expectations. That discussion in the book about communicating expectations really hit me because I'm not the type to really communicate that, which is really surprising because in romantic relationships, I am very immediate about what I expect from you and what I will not, be okay with. But in friendships, I'm not really like that. And so I was like, why? I was wondering, like, why do I do that in romantic relationships, but not with friendships?
Mhm.
But reading this book made me realize that. Is there anything in the book that made you realize, like, maybe I should have handled this friendship differently? Or go ahead, free.
One of my best friends in the entire world. We've been friends since we were in the third grade, and immediately following my college graduation, a few friends, we took a trip to Puerto Rico. While there, me and this friend got into a really huge argument over a very small misunderstanding. I made a joke. She didn't like it. She didn't want to hear me out say, that's not what I was trying to say. And
Mm,
it blew up into this big, huge thing. We didn't speak for 8 years.
Oh
Like,
my God.
oh yeah, that argument and the things that were done and said in that
mm,
argument
made it much worse.
severed our friendship.
Wow.
Hmm.
And that friendship was very central to other, very close friendships that we both shared.
Hmm.
And so it kind of did something to those other friendships between us all as well. Um, we're now back to being the closest of friends, but it took a very long time to get there. And
Hmm.
it took a lot of conversation and a lot of being open and being very vulnerable with each other. And,
Hmm.
you know, growing up and having more life experience and being in a very long-term relationship with my husband and learning how to get through that um, led the way for me to figure out how to get this friendship back.
Hmm.
Because I used the things that I used in relationships. Um,
Hmm.
to figure out how to make it work. It was like, okay, if I want this friend and I want us to, find some semblance of what we used to have with each other, then I've got to sit down and use these tools that I use with my husband, right? About
Mm.
communication and figure out what went wrong. And because it was definitely a situation that shouldn't have ever gotten to where it did. But in communicating properly with each other, we had to come to an understanding that at that time in our lives, we were both dealing with a whole lot, going through a lot of things. And she felt like the way I was moving in my life and the direction that I was going in, I was leaving her.
Mm.
So, any little thing just kept building and building and building.
Yeah.
Always felt like I was attempting to sever our relationship, or I was attempting to, distance us as friends because I was choosing to do things that she didn't want to do in her life, where we had always been so very, the same,
Lockstep. Yeah.
choosing to do everything together, even when we weren't doing things together, right? We were always there with.
Hmm.
And so the moment I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to go over here and I want to do this. And I'm not going to be worried about what you're going to do because we grown now. But that was my attitude. It was like,
Yeah.
I'm grown. I got to figure out my life. This is what I'm going to do. You don't want to go to school. You don't want to do this over here. That's what you're going to do. But she felt very left behind.
Mm.
And so, that kind of translated into how we began to communicate with each other. And so when the shit hit the fan,
It hit the fan for real.
yeah, it hit the fan and all of those emotions came out, but they didn't come out in that way. They came out in you this and the and all of the
Mm.
anger came out. And
Mhm.
so, 10 years later, we sitting down talking about it, and it's like, oh my God, that's what happened. I had no
Mhm.
idea. If I would have known that,
Mm.
if you would have understood about me that it wasn't about separating myself from you, but figuring myself out,
Yeah.
you wouldn't have felt left behind. You wouldn't have felt as if this was some sort of slight to you.
Right.
I wouldn't have felt like you was just being a raging bitch because I don't want to deal with that in my life. So, it was like, okay, here we are now
Yeah.
mature, and we can have
Right.
conversations and
Right.
really figure out what the issue is and how to move forward. And now it's like, me as a person, if you have a problem, we need to sit down and talk about it, because the
Mhm.
minute you say something crazy to me, I'm be like, yo, that's not what I'm trying to do with my life. So,
Yeah.
woo.
I mean,
Does anybody else have a
yeah, the pandemic has definitely exposed some things. Like, we're all going through a pandemic. We're all not necessarily as empathetic to others because we're all dealing with something, right? And so I know there are some friendships that I'm going to have to work on once we get into a better place outside of this pandemic,
yeah.
because it has caused rifts to the point that we're not talking, or we're not talking as much. But
Mhm.
it's like right now everybody has to kind of just retreat to their corners because we don't have the headspace, the heart space, the
Right.
energy, the time, because that's what relationships require, right? And like, if I know if
Mhm.
I can't give all those things to fix the schism that we have right now, maybe it's just best that we stay to our corners until we really can. And also the distance thing makes it hard too, because like,
Yeah.
normally if I have an issue, it's like, oh, okay, well, next trip home, we gonna meet up and have brunch and like work it out. And like, trying to do that over Zoom at one point in one group of friends, I felt like I was being ganged up on. I was like, I'm not joining the Zoom to have a whole bunch of women just gang up on me. Like,
Oh
that's not
yeah.
gonna happen, right? So I was
Especially
like,
not now.
yeah, I was
Right.
like, so let's put a pin in this when I can actually get home and so on and so forth. And even still, when I got home and we had that conversation, we just didn't have enough time to resolve it in that way. And so, like, again, the communication has changed. But
Mhm.
right now, we most of us just don't have headspace and heart space to work on repairing any problems that we might be having in some of our relationships.
Right.
I'll even
So
say for myself, I'm having conflict because I know my friends, I'm an empath. I know my friends are having issues. My closest friend lost her dad to
oh
COVID-19.
no.
He and his wife and their immediate family went to Vegas over 4th of July weekend, and as soon as he got home, he had been in the hospital. He passed about 4 weeks ago, so
Oh
he'd been in
no.
the hospital since July.
Mhm.
And I know I'm going crazy, in this house. If you guys ever seen 40-Year-Old Virgin, remember when the man was drumming in his underwear and doing all that craziness in the house? That's almost me at this point, because I don't want to go outside. But I do have friends, and I'm like thinking to myself, your issues are nowhere near the scale of some of your other friends. And
Yeah.
even though your heart might be breaking and you might be going through something, you still may have to have a little bit of energy for your friend that calls you at 2 a.m. like, I miss my dad, I can't deal with this shit
Yeah.
anymore. Can
Yeah.
you, yeah, let's talk. Even though I got a meeting at 7 o'clock in the morning, let's talk. But I
Mhm.
still, sometimes I'm like, I might need to be that person to call someone at 3 o'clock in the morning, because I've been up for nearly 48 hours straight, stressing because I don't want to get on a plane to check on my family, to check on my
Mhm.
parents. I have a manager who had a total meltdown on one of our work calls because both of her parents are in the hospital from
Mm.
COVID-19, and her mom broke her hip. She has COVID-19 and pneumonia. And
Oh
I'm
wow. It's
here like,
lot.
conflict, like Tiffany said, might have to go on the back burner because we're all so
Right.
emotionally stressed. And I
Right.
myself, like I tell all my friends, I have election anxiety right
Oh
now.
yeah.
I'm like, I need this shit to be over with.
Just
I just
let me know how it's gonna go. Come
I,
on.
Right. I need these crazy people to stay out of the Bay Area. Y'all go terrorize Georgia, whatever, but it's seriously.
Georgia.
I'm sorry. No. Go terrorize Maine. How about that? Terrorize Maine. Okay.
Now we got it. That'll work.
But
There's no chapter over there. That's fine.
I'm sorry, Tawanda. I didn't mean that. I didn't mean it, y'all. But I'm just saying.
Listen, okay? That's who he was talking to when he said stand back and stand by. Please.
Exactly. But conflict, I mean, I think to myself, you may need to pick up the phone and talk to some folks, but right now I got to get myself into a headspace where I can have that conversation. Because I know I'm not 100%. I don't even know if I'm 30% at this point. So when I tell people, hey, I got some Uncle Nearest right here. I got Uncle Nearest because I'm trying to keep myself at a point where people would want to call me at 2:00 in the morning and say, I'm not doing good. But I also am trying to figure out am I going to be that person to say, yo, I'm having an issue.
Yeah. That's a good transition to we are like at the end at this point where it's pretty late, but I wanted us to end on a positive note about friendship. I had a question about letting friendships go, but instead of going that route, I wanted us to possibly share stories of when a friend really made us grateful for that friendship because of something they did for us, and that's how the book kind of ended for me. I was almost a little teary-eyed a little bit when Amina talked about her friend that helped her with her surgery. And was like really, really there for her because I had the same issue last year where I had a myomectomy. And when I went into the hospital, the surgery was just supposed to be an hour and a half. And so it's supposed to be like just a regular, no issue surgery. My mom was going to be there. And then one of my friends said, well, I'll be there with your mom. And it ended up going from 90 minutes to 5 hours because they found more tumors to take out. And I know my mom was probably freaking out because I'm an only child and she was there. She would have been there alone, but my friend was like, I'll stay there with you. I think she left once to get food and she was there when I woke up. And of course, I'm under, so I had no idea this was happening. But when I woke up, I was like, wow, like that really moved me that she stayed there the whole time so that my mom was not alone. And so reading the book, I was like, it wasn't, I mean, it was a big deal to me then, but like because a year has passed and I saw that it happened with someone else, it just really, really hit me. Like these friendships can, you know, they just mean so much sometimes and you're just living your life and then you have to reflect on it and like, damn, that was a really sweet thing she did for me. Does anybody else have a situation similar you like to share before we end it?
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead,
would say like speaking to what like Erika was saying, a lot of times I have been the strong friend for other friends. And it's also been very jarring for them that like Tiffany is in a space where she can't be the strong friend for me like I used to be. So particularly I lost my job and in the same week my first love died of a drug overdose. Right? When I say my people stepped up for me, I was getting phone calls from everybody and everywhere. And it wasn't just the big friendships. It was the people like, we only like see each other once a year at a conference or they only comment on my Facebook. Like people really showed up for me. And that was so touching because it truly was a manifestation of like what I have put into the universe was coming back to me when I needed it, right? For a change versus me always being the strong one for everybody else. So yeah, like I have to say that's one of the gifts of the pandemic of actually learning of like who truly rides for you, who truly cares about you, and not just like, yeah, they may only do surface level things of like give you a like or a comment, but when like we keep saying throughout this call, when shit hits the fan, they know like I actually need to call Tiffany or I actually need to text, even if she doesn't get back, just so I can let her know that she's in my thoughts and prayers.
Right. Tawanda?
I mean, one of the things that still, I guess, moves me, and it's similar to the one in the book. I got really sick once, and many years later, after I had already, been come out of that illness and was recovered, I Googled myself. I Googled my name, and on it my name came up on a prayer forum, and it was a prayer from EJ, just basically petitioning people. It makes me emotional still now. Petitioning for people to pray on my behalf and for my health. And, at the time, she was just a 20-year-old college student. She didn't have a lot of resources. She was in a completely different state. She couldn't come down. But even being physically separated, she was still very, spiritually generous and spiritually connected. And it moves me every single time. And never brought it up. I just Googled my name and I was like, what are you doing on this prayer forum? And she was like, call it out by name, petition on her by name, Tawanda. So I love that. And then even when she was able to come and get me, come and visit me, it's knowing someone so well. I had a tracheotomy, so I couldn't speak. And as soon as she comes in the room, she's like, take those pigtails out of her head. She doesn't like her hair like that. And that's why she's upset. And so just knowing someone so well that when you can't speak for yourself, they can get to the root of the issue and be like, stop it.
Ooh, that's a touching story. Thank you.
So it's hard for me to even think about a story because instantly just want to start bawling. But
yeah. We be emo.
so emotional. It's ridiculous.
I got my tissue right here.
So my dad died of cancer last year. And it came out of nowhere. He was diagnosed in February and he died in April. And I don't always get upset about it, right? Because I feel like I'm in a better space. But I just remember I have two older brothers. They're fantastic people. They're for me. My husband was there for me. But my two, my best friends are my sisters, right? So Tawanda and Sharina, I didn't have to ask. I didn't have to even think they were there. I don't even remember how they appeared at my house all these years later. They were just here. Everything I needed, they were by my side. And it was so wild because the day my dad died, Tawanda was she was actually overseas and she loved my dad too. So I didn't want anyone to tell her because I didn't want to ruin her trip. And so she called me from the airport and she's like, EJ. And I was just, what was I supposed to do, right? Because she knew I needed her and it didn't matter what she was doing, she was there. And so I joke on her all the time because sometimes she's funny in the light, but that's my girl, And I didn't have sisters. I always say this all the time. I don't have sisters. I have two older brothers. I'm the youngest girl. And God blessed me with two sisters because Tawanda and Sharina have been my backbone. When we talk about that question that you had asked earlier, Nakia, about how do you get past when you have issues with your friends, I could never stay mad at Tawanda. We would get into an argument and I'd have to call her the next day because something happened with some random thing and I had to talk to her. So there was just no room in our friendship for that. And I'm sorry I got all misty, but I can't even imagine what my life would have been like if I didn't have Tawanda and Sharina in my life. Honestly, I'm just so blessed that they're a part of, who, because they really are fundamental to who I am as a person. So thank you, bestie.
Beautiful.
Same friend. God.
And for anybody watching, this is all happy tears. All happy tears. We're not sad. These is really happy tears. Started off though, I was the first one to start crying. It ain't even my stories.
I was not expecting.
I felt bad.
I'm a G. I'm a thug. I do not cry. Okay.
No, I'm sitting here why am I crying just thinking about this? This is wild to me. Anyway. Yeah, sorry to make it.
All things that, at least not EJ's dad, but my story, this is decades ago, but sometimes I still think about it. I'm just like, that was really sweet, dog.
Any other stories before we say goodbye? And this is it.
No, I have a story, but I don't want to share it because it's something that I've had to process for a very, very long time.
Mm-hmm.
My best friend from college passed away of cervical cancer the day before Biggie died. So first, I'm telling my age, number one. But number two, I think that was the absolute worst weekend of my life, so to speak, or time of my life. But I'm grateful that my I call her, she's one of my very dearest friends, but I call her my play cousin, my friend Nadira, who's in Philadelphia. Every year, and it has not failed, she has sent me a card around that same time to say, I love you. Because this is my best friend. And back then, the treatments for cancer were so rough, to say the least. What started off as cervical cancer became uterine cancer, became stomach cancer, and it was bad. And the thing that kills me about this, my best friend went into remission twice. And the third time when it came back, she didn't even want to tell me. And I still struggle with this because it was something about my personality that she didn't want to tell me that it was back. Because when she finally had to tell me, she only had 4 months left. And to this day, the one thing that she said when she told me, and I was on the phone and I just lost it. She's like, you know what, bitch, just call me when you get it together. I'm sitting here like, my best friend just told me that this shit is back. I don't even know how to process this. So it had me all feeling that there was something about me where people just can't get that deep, or they were afraid to tell me because of how I might break down. And I think because of that turned me into that strong Black woman friend where, okay, people can tell me stuff, I'm here for you, but it's hard for me to be able to say, well, you know what? I just ate all this Haagen-Dazs because my mom said X, and it just brought me back to something that she did to me when I was a kid that I never got over. And I had to say, Mom, why'd you do this? Or Daddy, why'd you let her do this? And I'm grateful that that maturity has taken over. I'm grateful for the friendships that I have. And I'm hoping that I'm learning to be a better friend because of certain situations. And I know it's hard for all of us. We're all human and we don't want to believe that we have flaws. But that moment in time when she had to basically tell me, you know, deuces for a minute, made me feel like, what is it about me that I can't process certain kind of information? It makes it hard to process information. But I'm grateful for Nadira because whatever I was going through, that time period, every year I get a card from her and it makes me feel a little bit better. I mean, can you imagine losing your best friend and then the next thing you're sitting in your best friend's living room with her mom and her auntie and cousins, and we're watching TV and we're all in this state of depression. And the next thing you know, they're telling us Biggie was killed. And I'm sitting here like, Jesus.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It was a lot. I'm grateful because it has made me into the person that I am today. I try to do my best for my friends and be there for them. And I'm learning to let people be there for me. It's so hard.
Thank you for that. It is time for us to go ahead and end our discussion. You guys brought some great perspectives and insight. I love the stories. I will say that I feel like even though I feel like this book kind of did help me reassess what type of friend I am, and it gave me a few tools to be a better friend. And along with my own experiences, you know, I feel like those help as well. Um, so I'm glad we read it, even though I didn't vote for it, you know.
Same.
I am glad I read it because I probably wouldn't have read it if if it wasn't a book club selection. So yeah. And then I'm like, maybe I want to listen to their podcast. Maybe I
I
might.
thought that same thing. I was like, maybe I should start listening to the podcast. I probably won't, but maybe.
EJ, like,
When EJ can start your podcast.
Right.
Look at EJ making faces. I'm just saying.
But thank you guys for coming and joining our panel. And hopefully we'll be able to put this up on YouTube so other people can see it since we weren't able to stream through Facebook like we planned. And that's it. Thank you.
Have a good week, ladies. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Bye.
too.
Wear your mask.
And vote if you haven't.
Yes, vote.
Definitely vote.
Oh,
Vote,
yeah.
vote.
Vote.
Okay.